Hello everyone, this is Garbotoxin TCG, and today I'm gonna show the second part of my big Ex-Era Scarlet and Violet project. If you didn't check the first video, I will highly suggest to check it out. I basically explain why I'm making the project and the basic rules of the project. Basically the general information about the Ex-Era Scarlet Violet project. This video will be more about showcasing the cards of the base set, explaining a little bit of my design decision and how certain cards will play with other cards of this format. To start things off, here's Professor Turo and Professor Sada. They're both Professor's Research in the original Scarlet Violet base set, but since I didn't really want Professor's Research in the Gentry era, as I talked about in the last video, as why Professor's Research speed up the game so much and wouldn't really see a print in older formats, I wanted to make them each different cards with their own specific effect. You can, with both of the cards, you can choose one or two effects, and the second choice for both of the cards is that you can choose an item or a basic Pokemon from your deck and put in your hand. The first effect of Professor Turo is that you can discard your hand and draw 5 cards, but you can't choose this effect if you have 3 or less Pokemon in play. This is kind of a nerf version of Professor's Research for the first effect, and for the second effect is a different Arvin. You can't choose this effect if you have 3 or less Pokemon in play, so you need 4 or more Pokemon. I kind of based it to fit with Miraidon. Miraidon EX searches your deck for a basic Pokemon, a basic Lightning Pokemon non-EX, and puts it on your bench. So this directly synergizes with Professor Turo's first effect. But also, Professor Turo can search your deck for an item or a basic Pokemon if you can't choose the first effect. Or if you just want to search an item for your deck for an item or a basic Pokemon. The item part is kind of similar for Arvin, since Professor Turo and Professor Sada are both the parents of Arvin. But you can search your deck for Pokemon instead, basically instead of a tool, and that's to basically search your deck for Miraidon. So if you don't have enough Pokemon to use the Professor Turo the first choice of Professor Turo, you can use the second effect to search your deck for Miraidon and then build up your bench gradually with Miraidon, so you can eventually use the second effect of the first effect of Professor Turo. Professor Sada's first effect is quite different, but also makes you draw a card. You discard a card from your hand, then you draw a card for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play. But you can't choose this effect if you have 5 or more other cards in your hand. So this is a nerf version of Steven's advice for the first effect and a different Arvin for the second effect. You discard 1 card from your hand and you draw 1 for each Pokemon in play. So you need to discard a card to use the Steven's advice effect, and Steven's advice makes you is actually unable to be played if you have 6 or more other cards in your hand. But this is 5 or more other cards. So basically, you can't have one more. If you have one more card, if you have 6 cards in your hand, then you can use Steven's advice, but you can't use Professor Sada. And Professor Sada makes you discard 1 card. The discard 1 card usually is a bad effect, but if you play it with Koraidon EX, you can actually use it to discard the specific energy you need to use Koraidon's EX Poke Power of Dino Cry, which makes you accelerate the energy cards from your discard pile. Or if you can't use this first effect since you have too much cards in your hand, you can just search your deck for a basic Pokemon or an item card, cards that could probably empty your hand, or make you use other cards in your hand so you can have less cards in your hand to eventually use the first effect of Professor Sada. So I really thought about I think two of the greatest draw supporters, and nerfing them in addition of fusing them with Arvin. I hope they're not too powerful, and I think designing them was kind of fun too. So I hope that I hope they're not too good, but I hope they're good enough to be staples in the format. Now let's look at the other draw supporters of the base set. First off, I want to talk about Judge and Youngster. So, also by the way, there's blue dots sometimes on the top right corner of cards. This blue dot is basically to tell you that the card is the same as the original card. So Youngster is shuffle, draw 5, and Judge is both player shuffle and draw 4. So they're the same cards as the original cards. You can see a blue dot on the top right corner to know that. So Judge is really similar to Desert Shaman. It's basically Desert Shaman, but you need to draw 4, not up to 4. And Desert Shaman was seeing a lot of play. I don't know if it's like extreme amount of play, but it saw a lot of play at the early era of Gen 3 and the first few sets of Gen 3 because it was a card that was in the latest part of Gen 2. So Judge was a card that already existed in Gen 3, and the same thing as Youngster. Youngster was in the form of Professor Oak's research. It's the same effect. So these cards can see play, and depending if your deck needs it, you can put them in your deck. Nimona is a completely different card, a card that didn't see similar play. There's no cards like Nimona in the Gen 3 era. Nimona has 3 effects. If you don't have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, you draw 2 cards with a Mom's Kindness or a Bill or whatever. But if you have exactly 1 or 2 more prize cards remaining than your opponent, so if you lose by 1 or 2 prizes, you draw 3 cards. So that's the classic draw supporters that makes you draw 2 cards or 1 card and makes you draw extra cards if you meet a certain criteria. A lot of supporter cards does that in the Gen 3 era. But there's a third effect, because I think if it was just for the second one, it would be kind of weak. The third effect is if you have 3 or more prize cards remaining than your opponent, so if your opponent wins by 3 or more, well, instead of drawing 3 or drawing 2, you look at your top 5, and you put 3 in your hand and the rest in your discard. So it's also a little bit of discard synergy, but this effect will rarely work if you're a deck that's aggressive and takes a lot of prize fast. If you're a deck that slows down and needs to build up a good board before having a prize, winning the prize race, well, Nimona is a great card for your deck. Now let's look at the other supporters in the format. I think that's all of them with the other cards I've shown before. Arvin is the same card as before. Searching your deck for an item and a tool can be really strong. There's some fetch or like supporter fetch in the Gen 3 and Gen 4 era, but Arvin can search your deck for an item and Pokemon tool. So there's no Pokemon, there's no supporter. I think it's a card that mostly helps you in the turn right now. And the best fetch supporters besides Pokemon fetching supporters were the one that helps you in the next few turns, like Cyrus's Conspiracy or Scott. So I think Arvin is just good enough for the format right now. Jack, I kind of nerfed it. The card before makes you search for 2 evolution Pokemon, but would just be a straight up better version than Elm. And the Jack for the Ex-Era Project is still a better version of Elm, but not like an astronomical better version than Elm. Elm makes you search your deck for an evolution Pokemon and puts it in your hand. But Jack makes you search either for 2 evolution non-EX or 1 EX. So kind of infusion of Professor Elm's training method and Bridget that makes you search for basic Pokemon in the X and Y era. So it's basically a Professor Elm for EX or a double Professor Elm for non-EX. I think this card has the potential to be broken, but I'm hoping that the card can just be good enough or just be like a staple but not like game breaking. If the card is too strong, I'll probably just nerf it to just be a Professor Elm's training method. Penny is exactly the same card as Mr. Briney's Compassion. Sometime, like if something is not broken, you don't need to fix it. So Penny could have been Briney's Compassion that can work on EX, but only on basic, just like the Penny is right now. But I think Mr. Briney's Compassion was a card people love to play, and I think Penny is a recognizable enough character to warrant this new broken card. Not broken, but this new staple that Mr. Briney's Compassion was. Team Star Grunt was nerfed too from its original printing. Now you can only use it on active evolve Pokemon instead of just active Pokemon. I think this is great because if not, you can stock a basic Pokemon in the active, and putting it only for active evolve makes it harder for the Team Star Grunt player to just loop a broken uh, locking effect. Katie and Miriam are two cards that shuffle back Pokemon or just recycles Pokemon from your discard pile. Miriam is a nerf version of the original card, where you shuffle 4 instead of 5 and you draw 2 instead of 3. I kind of compared it to Mr. Stone, I think, which was a supporter card that shuffled energies or Pokemon but didn't make you draw a card. Miriam just lets you put 4 Pokemon but makes you draw 2 cards afterward. Kitty is a card that I've been told would be broken if it was printed in the normal EX era. In the normal EX era, yeah, with like Blastoise EX and stuff like that. But in the custom card format I'm building, is just good enough until there's a card that breaks it. But Kitty lets you put 3 of any combination of basic non-EX Pokemon or basic energy from your discard pile into your hand. I kind of based it around the fact that Kitty is the weakest gym leader, the first gym leader for most people in the Scarlet Violet games. So she wouldn't she wouldn't really take back broken or legendary Pokemon or just EX Pokemon, but she wouldn't take back evolution instead. And I think Kitty is, as a character, is really soft, and I think recycling has a soft personality. So I think recycling or like rescuing Pokemon or energies is a design that fits her well. Now let's look at the item cards. These cards are basically the fetches in the base set. Pokeball is the same thing as the normal Pokeball, and I think there was a Pokeball in the EX era too that didn't see play. So it's just flip a coin, if it search your deck for a Pokemon. Half the time it fails, half the time it's broken, right? Well, not broken because there's other cards that searches your Pokemon guaranteed, but yeah. It's a flip a coin cards. I don't think we'll see play, but I don't see a reason to change it because it's just Pokeball. Nest Ball, I changed it so that it cannot fetch for a basic Pokemon, a basic EX Pokemon anymore to put on your bench. So it's basically the same card as Great Ball, same point as Penny. If it's not broken, why fix it? So Nest Ball, same thing as Great Ball. Ultra Ball is nerfed. It's the same thing as you discard 2 cards from your hand and search your deck for any Pokemon. But to use Ultra Ball, you also need to meet one of its 2 conditions. Either you need to have less Pokemon in play. So if your opponent has 4 Pokemon in play and you have 3 Pokemon in play, you can use Ultra Ball. But also you can have less evolution Pokemon in play than your opponent. If your opponent has 3 stage 1 and 1 stage 2, and you have 2 stage 1, you can use Ultra Ball even though you have more bench Pokemon than your opponent. So this is basically to fit Ultra Ball more in the comeback mechanic of the Gen 3 era, and not just make it a speed fest like Professor's Research kind of is right now in the current standard format. Pokegear and Energy Search are the same card as they were before. Energy Search was the same back then in Generation 3, and Pokegear 3.0 I don't think existed in the Gen 3 era, but I think this card can be tested as it is right now. Worst case, I can just lower the number eventually if the card is too broken in the testing. Lower the number of like cards you look at the top, so it can be 3, 4, 5, etc. So for the other items, Pokemon Catcher is the same card as Pokemon Reversal, so there's no need to change it. Switch is the same card that has been existing since like 1997, 1998, so it's the same card. There's no change necessary. Crushing Hammer is the same card as Energy Removal too. This flip a coin if it choose an energy and discard it. So same old Energy Removal too. Energy Switch, same point as Switch. This type of effect existed on trainer cards since the dawn of time. And Rare Candy is a really interesting case. Back then, Rare Candy could be used on your turn 1 or on a Pokemon that entered the board this turn. And it was nerfed in Generation 5 to be that you need to wait a turn to use Rare Candy. But now you can use it on stage 1, stage 2, and on the turn you played the basic Pokemon, and on your turn 1. So good old Rare Candy is back, and I hope it see a lot more play with stage 2s, and even stage 1, just buffs evolution in general for the Ex-Era Scarlet Violet Project. For the last few items, potion, I nerfed it to be like the old potion, where it's heal 2 instead of heal 3. Picnic basket, I just nerfed it to fit more potion. Right now, in the standard format, picnic basket is heal 3 for every Pokemon, but now it's heal 2 for every Pokemon. I think it has potential to be really good, because it can heal 40, 60, 80, but also heals your opponent, so it's not just a straight upgrade for potion, but I think it will be a great card to combat spread, which I think would be really good in the base set or just so on in the Scarlet and Violet EX era. Energy Retrieval was a card that existed before. Same old Energy Retrieval, put 2 basic energy from your discard pile, put them in your hand. Yeah, basically that. Pulpad, I didn't change it. I think if we compare it to Versus Seeker, which existed back then, Generation 3, Pulpad is a lot weaker. So if you want to use Pulpad, go for it. It's shuffled 2 supporter from your discard pile to your hand. It's great to reuse supporters if you want a deck that focuses on using certain supporters to help it again in the game. Electric Generator is a lot nerfed. Instead of looking at the top 5 and choosing 2 basic lightning and attaching them to your bench lightning Pokemon, look at your top 2 and attach only 1 basic lightning energy. So I think it will still be really good. I think the card has a lot of potential, but there's also another bad effect now, and it's if you attach those cards to a Pokemon EX, your turn ends. So you can attach them to a Miraidon EX, you can attach them to your other Lightning Pokemon EX, but if you do that, it's as if you use an attack. Now, it's only if you attach them to a Pokemon EX. So if you whiff it or you attach them to a normal non-EX Pokemon, you'll be fine. But it's only top 2, so be wary of it. It's kind of like a Crush Draw from Walrein, but as in item form. You can only use it 4 times technically, and it ends your turn if you attach them to Pokemon EX. Now let's look at the 5 tools in the base set. Vitality Band, I didn't change it because it's really similar to Plus Power. Now Plus Power didn't count as your tool for the turn, but you can also loop them, and you can also loop them with other Plus Power. So you can use like 3 Plus Power for the turn and use a Pokemon tool, and so your Pokemon can do 30 more damage for the turn. But Plus Power is just not a straight better version of Vitality Band, because Vitality Band stays in the Pokemon unless your opponents use a card that discards Vitality Band. So it's a Plus Power that can only be used once and uses your Pokemon tool for the Pokemon, but it stays, right? It stays until the Pokemon doesn't have Vitality Band or is knocked out. Defiance Band, I changed it to be really similar to Solid Rage. It's not an exact copy, but it's Solid Rage that doesn't discard itself if it's on a basic or a stage 1. So if you want to empty your hand, you can attach Solid Rage to a Pokemon that can't use it, but Defiance Band can't be used and it stays there. So it's good if you want to eventually evolve a Pokemon with Defiance Band, but it's bad if you plan on discarding the Solid Rage eventually. So it's just it's like an upgrade and downgrade, but it's really, really similar most of the time. For Rocky Helmet, this is an interesting card. I hope it's not too good because it's really similar to Vitality Band. And instead of doing the 10 damage with your attack, you put 1 damage counter when you receive an attack. So it's bad if you get gusted. It's bad if the Pokemon just doesn't attack you, right? If you're against a deck that doesn't attack or does damage, you're kind of screwed with the Rocky Helmet. But it's a card that, like, even if you don't attack, or even if you knock out a Pokemon with your damage, the next Pokemon could receive a damage counter while attacking you. Rock Chestplate, just like Electric Generator, is a lot nerfed for Pokemon EX. Instead for your fighting Pokemon to receive 30 less damage from attacks, your fighting Pokemon now receive 20 less damage from attack from opponent's Pokemon EX. So it's only from Pokemon EX, and if it's a Pokemon EX with damage counters on them, Rock Chestplate just doesn't work. So for the card it's attached to. So if your Rock Chestplate is attached to a Stonejourner, the Stonejourner from base set, it works fine. If you receive a damage from Pokemon EX. But if it's attached on a Crydon EX, it's also fine. But if the Crydon EX also has damage counters, then it's not fine. The point of like this specification for Rock Chestplate and for Extra Generator is for them to still work with Miraidon and Koraidon or Pokemon EX, but to be a lot nerfed for those Pokemon EX. XP Share is a straight upgrade from XP All. I didn't change XP Share, but it's XP Share that doesn't discard itself once the effect is used once. So it's just an upgrade. If the XP Share proves itself to be just too good, I'll probably nerf it to be just an exact copy of XP All, or to not work on certain type of Pokemon like Evolved Pokemon or Pokemon EX. For the two stadiums, I didn't change them. Mesagoza and Beach Court are fine as is if they were printed back then. I think some stadiums in Generation 2 will just see more play than these two types of stadiums. Mesagoza is just a Pokeball you can reuse on your next turn, but it also gives it to your opponent. So it's like not just a straight upgrade of Pokeball. And Beach Court is just a retreating option that you can also give to your opponent. So they're fine as is. They did not use the power creep, and they don't use the fact that the game is so speed up. So they're fine as is. They're the same card in the Ex-Era format. Now let's look at the Pokemon. I have a few Pokemon for each type that I want to showcase. So let's start with Speed Up CX. Speed Up CX now has a Pokebody instead of an ability, and the attack is just a straight up downgrade version of its past attack. So you do 30 damage plus 10 damage for each energy symbol in the retreat cost of the opponent's active Pokemon, and its Trap Territory Pokebody adds a 1 in the retreat cost. So if you have a bunch of speed ups, it could just increase in general the warrior Ang attack. So speed ups can be both a disruptor and a good attacker. You can pair Speed Up CX with Era Cross, which has the same attack of Speed Up CX, but does 10 base damage instead of 30 base damage. So you can pair them together if you want a basic attacker that doesn't give 2 prizers. The funny thing about the Tarantulas is they were so much weak HP wise that 2 of them I just didn't change. They're the same card as the normal Scarlet Violet format. It didn't happen that often for the Pokemon. It's mostly for weak HP evolving basics. Now Meowscarada is an interesting stage 2. It has the Flower Trap Pokebody that if it's active and you put attach energy from their end to the active Pokemon, you put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon. It goes well with its Trick Cape attack that does 20 damage and put an energy back from the Pokemon to the active. So if they want to just put it back, they can, but that's the energy for turn, and they put 1 damage counter on it. Meowscarada also has a 2 energy attack that does 4 damage. You can pair Meowscarada with Crushing Hammer, that if you flip a coin and get edge, you discard energy from an opponent's Pokemon. So you can pair that with a Trick Cape and just disrupt energy-wise the opponent, and just ask them to attach the more energy and put more damage with the Flower Trap Pokebody. You can pair it with Speed Up CX, since you're disrupting them energy-wise, making them use more energy to retreat, can just stuck a Pokemon on the active. And Toast Cruel does the same thing, where you can move energies from the active Pokemon to bench Pokemon, which is kind of similar to POW and Extension. So you can do that in combination with Crushing Hammer since you're already playing the card. Sprigatito, I also changed the Sprigatito's attack so that you can switch. If you evolve a bench Meowscarada and you cannot really afford to retreat Sprigatito, you can just use the Spring Run attack to switch into the Meowscarada, make it active, and enable its Flower Trap Pokebody. Vivillon is interesting mostly because of its pre-evolution. Scatterbug and Spoopa were nerfed. They both have the Adaptive Evolution Pokebody, where if it's not your first turn, you can evolve them on the turn you place them, and then you can play Scatterbug, evolve it immediately in Spoopa if it's your second turn or after, and then you can evolve into Vivillon. And Vivillon has the Bug Cycle Pokepower, which if it's active, you can search your deck for a Scatterbug, put it on your bench, and just continue the Bug Cycle all over again. Vivillon has the Miracle Powder attack, which for 2 energy does 4 damage, and if you win a coin flip, you choose 1 special condition and just affect the opponent's active with it. It could be sleep, which is just a straight downgrade of paralyze most of the time. It can be burn or poison to do increased damage, or it can be confusion. So instead of like confirming one turn, you can just make them confused and gradually makes their attack annoying to use. You can pair Vivillon with Jacques. Jacques is good, so you can search for a Spoople and a Vivillon to go immediately from Scatterbug to Vivillon. Or you can use Miriam, since you're basically looping bugs. Miriam is great to just put 4 Pokemon, probably a whole line, and a card you discarded earlier, or just another Pokemon from your deck, from your discard pile into your deck, and then draw cards. Next to the fire types, here's Arcanine EX. Arcanine EX has a similar design to its original version. Raging Claws and Bright Flame are just basically powered down version of the original attacks, but where the design changes for Arcanine EX is with its Enraging Flame Pokebody, where when you attach a fire energy from your end to it, you can choose to put a damage counter on it. Usually that's bad, right? But Raging Claws does more damage for each damage counter on Arcanine EX. So if you're short of 1 damage for 1-hit Kill Wing or 2-hit Kill Wing a certain Pokemon, well, you can use the Enraging Flames to enable more damage. The Terra effect is also really good for Arcanine, since you want a lot of damage on it, and Spread or Snipe can be really good in this format. It just protects Arcanine if it's on your bench. You can pair Arcanine with Armor Rouge, since sometimes you have too much damage on your Arcanine, you can just move it to the bench and then just move the energy to another fire attacking Pokemon. I think Pokemon Catcher is really good, since you can surprise a KO with Raging Flames, with a Raging Claws and Enraging Flames. Energy Retrieval is really good, I think, because Bright Flame discards 2 energy from Arcanine EX. So you can pair that with Energy Retrieval and basically have both energy just discarded back into your hand. One of the Growlithe also has a really good attack that makes you search your deck for a basic fire energy and attach it to this Pokemon. So you can basically have a turn 2 Bright Flame if you use turn 1 attack Stoke, turn 2 evolve, attach Bright Flame, and then you can just do 100 damage. Now let's look at Skeledirge. Skeledirge has the Rose Reveal Pokepower, which is a classic Pokepower that has been on a Salazzle and a Ninetales before. Which is you discard a fire energy from your hand and draw 3 cards. It's kind of weird, right? Because it's just a nerf version of Energy Draw Delcatty that was in the Ruby Sapphire base set. But Skeledirge also has good attacks. Passionate Singing is 20 damage, does 20 damage for 1, and you attach 2 basic energy for your discard pile to your Pokemon in the way you like. You can enable Skeledirge Blazing Shout in the coming turns, or you can just charge another Pokemon. So it's kind of a support in like drawing cards, but also charging energies if you attack with it. Blazing Shout just does 5 for 110, and Skeledirge does 20 damage to itself. It can be a great attack to when it kills certain Stage 1 EX, or just like Pokemon EX, or basic or Stage 2 Pokemon non-EX. You can pair Skeledirge with Armor Rouge, or Arcanine EX to enable them. Skeledirge's pre-evolution, Fuecoco and Crocodile, both have attacks that makes you discard cards and drawing cards. So it's great with the Rose. It's a great combination with the Rose Reveal and building you a bigger hand, but it can also work with the Passionate Singing attack. Gyarados EX is the second and last Terra Pokemon from the Scarlet Violet base set. It's basically just a powered down version of Gyarados EX, and does 3 for 50 or 5 for 80, but you do 80 more damage if the opponent's active already has damage counter on it. So it's basically a straight 1-hit KO if you're already damaged the opponent's active Pokemon. So you can pair Gyarados EX with Rocky Helmet, where if they attack you and you have Rocky Helmet, they have damage, and then eventually you can 1-hit KO them. Or you can pair them with Rotom, which has the linear attack, which for 2 energy does 20 damage to an opponent's Pokemon of your choice. It can be bench or anything. It's also good because your Magikarp has really low HP. So you can... The Circuit Absorber Pokebody is that if Rotom is active, it protects your bench from effects or damage of attacks. So if Rotom is active, you can spread damage or like place damage with linear attack while protecting your Magikarp from lightning Pokemon attacks. The problem of Gyarados is that it needs a lot of energy to attack. Thankfully, in the next set, there's a lot of good thing for water energy acceleration. But right now, you can use Tatsugiri's Mise en Place attack, which just charge 2 energies from your deck to a basic water type. The problem with Tatsugiri's Mise en Place attack is that you need to charge a Magikarp, which is really low in HP. Quaquaval is great universal energy acceleration. Its energy carnival Pokepower can make you attach a basic energy from your end to a bench Pokemon. It's kind of similar to Walrein, where Crush Draw can make you look at the top card, and if it's an energy card, you can attach it to a Pokemon. But instead, from the top deck, it's from your hand, and instead to any Pokemon, it's to bench only. Walrein also overall has better attacks, but Quaquaval has a first attack that makes you do 30 to the front and 20 to a bench, so it can even be a great attack to spread a little bit before. Rare Candy, like, I won't put Rare Candy on every stage 2, but like, Rare Candy is great to just to get a Quaquaval fast, to get your energy fast on your board. You can pair it with Gyarados EX if you want, and also both of Quaquaval's Pre-Evolution, the Quaxly and the Quaxwell, can search your deck for basic energy, which is great to eventually attach them with Energy Carnival. Dondozo has a really high damage potential. Its Rage attack for 3 energy does 30 damage for each Tatsugiri in your discard pile, but if you knock out a Pokemon with this attack, that Dondozo does 30 damage to itself. You have a potential of 120 damage on a basic. The bad point is you need to find the Tatsugiri and you need to put them in your discard pile, and you need to find a way to put 3 energies on Dondozo. There's a lot of ways that you can charge Dondozo. I think Tatsugiri's Mise en Place attack just works well. You can just use Mise en Place until the Tatsugiri is knocked out. You can use Ultra Ball to discard Tatsugiris from your discard pile and just make it that you don't have that much Pokemon on your bench, so that your opponent can have more Pokemon than you, and then you can discard 2 Tatsugiri, search a Dondozo or another Tatsugiri. Onstone has the Funeral Pokebody, which makes you discard a Pokemon and draw 2 cards. So this can be great with Tatsugiri, and you can pair it with Katie to just get back Pokemon and just discard them eventually with Onstone. Or you can also use Professor Turo, which eventually, when you have a nice enough board, you can just discard your whole hand and draw 5 cards. This can be just all your Tatsugiris technically. But yeah, Dondozo can do a lot of damage. You just need to pair it with a good Pokemon and find a way to charge itself. 90 HP is also really, really, really good on a basic. That's the HP that some basic EX have. But the bad thing is that if you eventually knock out a Pokemon, Dondozo virtually has 60 HP because of its drawback of Freeze Rage. Magnezone EX is a Stage 2 Pokemon EX that has the Burning Magnet Pokebody. When one of your opponents switch their active Pokemon with their bench Pokemon with the effect of a trainer card, you can put 2 damage counters on the Pokemon that move to the bench, and it stacks with other Magnezone EX. So this card is great if you can trap the Pokemon in the active, and if they need to use a switch card, well, you say take 2 damage to the bench. You can move, yeah, use your effect, but take 2 damage for each Magnezone EX I have in play. It also has 2 great attack. The Energy Crush attack does 40 damage for 2, and you do 10 more damage for each energy on all your opponent's active Pokemon. So basically, if they get like 5 energies, you do 90 damage for 2, which is super great on a stage 2. Pulse Launcher for 4 energy does 80 damage, and you do 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So this can work well with the Burning Magnet. If you have a Pokemon if your opponent has a Pokemon stuck in the active and they use Switch, then they take 2 damage or 4 damage if you have 2 Magnezone. And then you can use Pulse Launcher, probably knock out the active, and probably knock out the bench too with bench damage. Yeah. You can pair Magnezone EX with Miraidon EX. Miraidon EX can search your Magnemite and put them on your bench, and Photon Blaster 3 for 80 is not bad. Speed Up 6 can also be a great partner since you can stock the active Pokemon with its Trap Territory Pokebody and eventually force them to use a switch. Or just stock them and you can just Energy Crush, knock out them. Electricity Generator does work with Magneton and Magnemite without ending your turn. So this can be paired well. And Magnemite has the magnetic switch attack, where you can switch this Pokemon when you have your bench. This can be just a great attack on a Magnemite. Now let's look at a deck that's more focused on Miraidon EX. Miraidon EX Stand-Em Unit Pokepower searches your deck for a basic non-EX Lightning Pokemon put on your bench, and its Photon Blaster attack, as said earlier, does 80 damage for 3, and makes Miraidon not able to attack during your next turn. You can pair Electricity Generator with Miraidon. It will end your turn if you attach energies to it, but it can work well. But I think the best partner right now for Miraidon EX is the Pachirisu. The Pokebody is not that relevant, but the Everyone Discharge attack can do a potential of 60 damage for 3 on a 1-prizer, and basically Miraidon searches your deck for basic and put on your bench. So it works really well in combo with Pachirisu. Professor Churro works really well if you have a lot of bench Pokemon. So, well, just works in general if you have a bunch of bench Pokemon. So Miraidon EX is great to enable it. And Palmot could be an interesting stage 2 to pair with Miraidon EX, since Miraidon EX can search for Palmie. And Palmot has the Electrogenesis Pokepower, which searches your deck for basic energy, attach it to Palmo. And Palmo just in general has 2 great attacks you can use. Now let's look at the Ampharos EX promo. Ampharos EX got the Shock Cure Pokepower, which is really similar to Meganium EX. That is basically you can attach a lightning energy from your end to one of your Pokemon and heal 10 damage to that Pokemon. So this is energy acceleration and healing at the same time. Ampharos EX also has a great attack. Thunder Strike Tail does 3 for 60, and you may discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. If you do, this does 110. So 110 can be great for certain mats, knock out certain stage 1 EX, certain stage 2, certain just basic one in general. And 60 sometimes is underpowered. So you can do underpowered damage or overpowered damage. You can pair it with the Flaffy promo. There's a promo Flaffy too. And the Flaffy promo, once you evolve into it, you can use the Dynamic Evolution Pokepower, which is that you search your discard pile for lightning energy and attach it to Flaffy, and you put 2 damage counter on Flaffy. The damage doesn't really matter if you plan on healing it regardless, and this can be great just to set up the Ampharos EX gradually. You can use Electricity Generator too to charge the Flaffy or the Mareep without ending your turn. Energy Retrieval is great too, because since you can attach for turn and attack with the Shock Cure ability, a Pokepower, well, you can just use Thunder Strike over and over and over again to do 110. Miraidon EX can be paired well too, because you can search your Mareep and put them on your board. I am anxious that Ampharos EX may be too powerful. You can just loop 110 damage all over again while healing because of energy retrieval. But if it warrants a nerf, I'll do it. But I think the card right now is testing worthy. Now let's look at Gardevoir EX. The funny thing about Gardevoir EX is that it didn't change the card that much. The 2 damage counters it plays with its Psychic Embrace Pokepower is a lot for a format with Pokemon with so low HP. So basically, yeah, you can attach any amount of basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile to Psychic Pokemon, but you put 2 damage counters for each energy attached this way. This Pokepower is shut down with special conditions. So the Miracle Force attack can be really great to knock out a Pokemon that put the special condition on you, while removing it from yourself and then enabling Psychic Embrace all over again if your Gardevoir EX is active. These are just a bunch of psychic attackers you can pair with Gardevoir. Dash Bun is immune to burn and fire Pokemon's attack, while it can do 70 damage for 3 if you move to the bench to the active. Dedenne is a great support Pokemon. For its Chick Filling at Tackle, does 10 damage for 1, and makes you draw until you have 4. So it's great if you have a low end. And the second Bite attack is great chip damage, or can do a buck ton of damage to a Pokemon that already received an attack. Drifloon can do a potential of 60 damage for 3 if you charge it with Gardevoir EX. And Mimikyu EX is just a good Pokemon in general. Its Void Return attack does 10 and switch it. Its Energy Burst attack does 30 plus 10 for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, which is great with the Energy Acceleration Gardevoir EX could give you. And the Extra Disguise Pokebody makes it take 30 less damage from Pokemon EX if it has full HP. So, yeah, these are all just great Pokemon that could be paired with Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX just gets better and better the more we receive Psychic Pokemon in the long run. Now let's look at Banette EX. Kind of similar to Manectric EX, Banette EX has a 2 energy attack that does 30 damage and shutdowns item cards from being played during your opponent's next turn. It also has a Pokebody that if a player, both you or your opponent, have 6 or more cards in their hand, they cannot play any stadium cards. So it can also potentially lock stadium cards from being played. Banette EX also has a Poltergeist attack, which for 3 energy does 30 damage and 10 more for each trainer cards in their opponent's hand. So basically the point of Banette EX is to lock your opponent out of playing certain type of cards, and eventually if they have too much of a bigger hand because of Everlasting Darkness, well now they can't play stadiums. And now they can't play stadiums, they can't play items, so Poltergeist can do a lot of damage. But it does not have the sniping potential Manectric EX have, but it's just a great Pokemon in my opinion regardless. You can pair Banette EX with Gardevoir EX if you want to charge it, or you can pair it with Speed Up CX if you want to lock your opponent in the active spot so they cannot even use Switch because of Everlasting Darkness. Choupette is a great pre-evolution too. For 1 energy it does 10 damage and it has 50% chance of locking out the item as soon as turn 1 with your baby. Houndstone is another great stage 1 attacker in general. As seen before, its front roll Pokepower can make you discard a Pokemon card from your hand and draw 2 cards, and it works well with its Last Respects attack, which does 20 damage plus 10 more damage for each Psychic Pokemon in your discard pile, with a maximum of 50 for this attack. So it can do 2 for 70, which is great. It can mix with draw a card, which is great. It can work well with Gardevoir EX, I guess, and you can use Professor Turo, Professor Ultra Ball, or even Professor Sada to make you discard card. Greavard also has an interesting attack. For 1, it does 10 damage for each Psychic Pokemon in your discard pile with a maximum of 30. So 30 damage with Greavard and 70 damage with Houndstone. And I know there's also a Houndstone EX that's going to come out in a set or 2 that will just be an upgraded version of Houndstone, so you can pair both Houndstone together. But for now, this Houndstone can be a great draw spotter and can be a great discard enabler and can be a great attacker too if you play Psychic Energy. Great Tusk EX is also kind of a Koraidon EX deck. They're both basic fighting attackers that are kind of bulky and can do a ton of damage. Great Tusk EX has the Paradox Rampage Pokepower, which is if you may discard a card when you attack with it, and if you do, it does 10 more damage. Simple as that. So Bedrock Breaker does 1 for 20 and you discard a Stadium, but if you discard a card from your hand, it does 1 for 30. And Gigantic Tusk does an extreme amount of 110 damage, but the bad effect is that you do 30 damage to itself. It does 30 damage to itself. So you go from 110 to 80 just with Gigantic Tusks, but it's a lot of damage. I can potentially KOs all the basic Pokemon you can find and all the non-EX Pokemon you can find. Mostly all of them. Paradox Rampage can even increase it to 120, so yeah, that's really big. Cardon EX can help you charge your Great Tusk EX, since like you can just discard card with Professor Sada and stuff like that. So Professor Sada enables Great Tusk and enables Koraidon too. You can use Pokemon Catchers to just get a weak Pokemon deactive to knock out with Bedrock Breaker, or to just knock out a Pokemon that wants to stay LT with Gigantic Tusks. Potion can be great if you plan on taking more attacks after Gigantic Tusks. Now let's look at Lucario and Lucario EX. The Lucario EX can work well with Lucario because they're both great stage 1 fighting attackers. Lucario EX can do 2 for 40 damage and makes you draw a card, but a really good attack with Lucario EX is 3 for 40 and you do 40 to a bench Pokemon. Overall, this is just great sniping potential. If you already damage a bench Pokemon, Aura Sphere can knock out 2 Pokemon in 1 attack. It has the potential to be really too strong, but I need to test the card first. The other Lucario does, for 2 energy, does 10 damage, and if you had a fighting Pokemon that was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, it does 70 damage for 2. So a great attack that can do 70 for 2, but you need to have a Pokemon that has been knocked out, a fighting Pokemon that has been knocked out during the last turn. Lucario EX is a great pairing with Alucha. Alucha does can put 2 damage counters on 2 bench Pokemon, but it only activates if you have Stadium in play. And right now there's only 2 Stadium available, and you need to have them in play. So if your opponent has them in play, you just cannot use them anymore. You cannot use Flying Entry. Lucario can also profit from a good Riolu that has the Heroic Sense Pokebody, which gives it free retreat if your opponent has 4 or less prize cards remaining. Great for the mid to late game. You can also charge Lucario EX or your Lucario in general. Well, no, you cannot charge them, but you can charge your Riolu with Groudon ZX Dinocry. Now let's go with the darkness and look at Toxicroak EX. Toxicroak EX is a stage 1 EX that has the Nasty Plot attack. For 1, you can search your deck for any 2 cards, or up to 2 cards. And if you search your deck for 2 cards this way, you put 1 damage counter on Toxicroak EX. So searching for 2 cards can be really, really, really strong, but having the bad effect of putting 1 damage on Toxicroak in exchange is just good like balance in general. Toxic Ripper for 3 does 30 damage and poison, and the poison does 3 damage instead of 1 during checkup. So it's technically a 3 for 60, but if the opponent stays active, it's 3 for 90, and then you can just accumulate damage even though you're not using Toxic Ripper anymore. So if you do like Toxic Ripper, 30 damage, then 60 with poison, they keep the Pokemon deactive, so now it's 90 damage, and you can use Nasty Plot. Search your deck for 2 cards instead of using Toxic Ripper, and then if they have 1 to or less damage, they would die of the poison. You can pair Toxicroak EX with Muck that has the Poison Sacs Pokebody, which makes poison stick even though the opponents evolve. And you can use Viper that does 20 plus 30 damage if your opponent is poison, so 50. So if you Toxic Ripper, you can do a big 1 KO on a not 1 KO, but you can do a KO then on a stage 2. Toxicroak has a Croagunk, the Prevolution of Toxicroak, has 2 good attack too. You can use 3 for 20 and poison, but the 1 for 10 and heal blocking can be really great if they plan on surviving with the poison. The good thing about Toxicroak EX also, by the way, is that poison blocks Pokepower. If the Pokemon has a Pokepower, they probably can't use it if they're poison. So yeah, just Toxicroak can disrupt as well, and that's why it's good with Speed Ups too. The Speed Ups helps disruption, but if they're stuck to the active and can't retreat because of the Trap Territory Pokepower, well then they're just stuck with the poison and they'll eventually die, even if you use Nasty Plot afterward. Then let's look at King Gambit. King Gambit has the Leadership Pokebody, which makes your non-EX basic do 20 more damage, and you can stack Leadership. It also has a good attack in my opinion, 3 for 50 and 40 more if the opponent's active is a stage 2. Opposition Act, yeah. Opposition Act. It's a weird play because Opposition is when 2 kings face each other in a chess game. So that's a fun fact for you. You can pair King Gambit with Dondozo to just like makes it do 140 damage now instead of 120, or I guess 110 instead of 90. You can pair it with these other basic Pokemon. There's not that much good basic attackers in this basic non-EX attackers right now in base set besides Dondozo, but eventually as time goes on, there will be more Pokemon potentially to be paired with King Gambit. I said Dondozo, I meant King Gambit. Yeah, sorry. King Gambit also has a good Bisharp. That's a stage 1 that can do 30 for 1 if you have a basic in play, and can do 3 for 50 damage. Now let's look at Iron Treads EX. Iron Treads EX is a basic EX state metal Pokemon that has the Paradox Trail Pokebody. If it's in the active spot and you use a supporter card during your last turn, you put 1 damage counter on each bench EX Pokemon during checkup. So 1 damage between turns to each bench EX if you use a supporter. So if you play Iron Treads EX deck, it's really important to play supporters, because then you can spread damage counters on bench EX. It's also good pairing with a triple laser attack. For 3 colorless energy, you can choose 3 Pokemon not on bench only. You can choose the active if you want, and put 2 damage counters on the chosen Pokemon. This pairs well too with the Paradox Trail Pokepower. If a Pokemon is stuck in the active, you can just ignore the active, put damage on the bench, and, with the 2 first thing on Iron Treads EX. Cybernetic Wheels is for 3 metal 1 Cardus, you do 70 damage and you switch Iron Treads EX. This is good and bad. You can pair this with like Klefki or another Pokemon that doesn't want that wants to get damage instead of Iron Treads. But it's bad because if you don't switch into another Iron Treads EX, the Paradox Trails Pokebody just stops, right? Even if you use a Sporter, because it needs Iron Treads EX needs to be active. So if you have two Iron Treads EX, you can just loop into them with the Cybernetic Wheels. Iron Treads EX is a great pairing with Alucha, right? Since Alucha puts more damage on the bench, you can put damage and then triple laser and then Paradox Trails, and it's also you can switch it into Klefki if you want to just stop Pokepower from the opponent's basic Pokemon, and you can use it with Beach Court. So like you can switch to Klefki, free treat Klefki with Beach Court, and Beach Court enables Alucha's Flying Entry Pokepower. And you can, I guess, charge Iron Treads because it uses a lot of energy. You can pair it with Quaquaval, with its Energy Carnival Pokepower. And Quaquaval also has the River Twirl attack to also spread or put damage counters on the bench. Revavroom is a great support Pokemon, which is like basically a fusion of the backup Porygon 2 and the Energy Throw Delcatty. Just like Delcatty, you need to discard an energy card to draw a card, but just like Porygon 2, instead of drawing a set amount of cards, you draw until you have X number of cards in your hand. For Revavroom's case, it's 7, which is more than Porygon 2. So it's not a better version of Porygon 2 because you need to discard energy to use it, but it's also different than Delcatty because you can draw less or you can draw more than Delcatty. The knockaway attack is quite weak, but Revavroom is mostly a support Pokemon. It's good it's a good pairing with Judge or like eventually Iono, because even though Judge gives you a short hand, if you draw an energy, you can just draw it right back up. And I guess you can pair it with Gardevoir EX too, because you can discard the energy that Gardevoir EX would charge. Now let's look at a really interesting design I made for the base set of this project. Winkalong EX. Winkalong EX has the Lingering Aroma Pokebody, where if it's in the active at the end of your turn, you put an aroma marker on the opponent's active Pokemon. A Pokemon with an aroma marker can't use its Pokebody, except for Lingering Aroma. So the special markers were things Pokemon did for 2 different cases, Tyranitar EX Delta Species and Gardevoir EX Delta Species. And like these special markers had special rules besides Burn and Poison, and kept themselves on the Pokemon even though it moves to the bench. So the point of Winkalong EX is to use a special marker that shuts down Pokebodies. I plan for each set to have a Pokemon that uses a special marker, and these are markers I make by myself too on Illustrator. And yeah, Winkalong EX is not just a marker machine. It also has 2 pretty okay attack. I actually did pretty great. Maddening Stomp. For 2 does 10 plus 10 for each bench Pokemon your opponent has in play, and you flip a coin if tails. During our next turn, Winkalong can't attack. Basically, it can do 2 for 70, but yeah, 2 for 60. Sorry, because it's for each bench. But you can't use this attack during your next turn. But at this point, just attack and put aroma marker. And Heavy Sand does 4 damage for 70. 4 damage. It's 70. It does 70 damage for 4 energies. And if your opponent's active has an aroma marker on it, it's now asleep. So that's great. It's just synergized if you add the aroma marker from previously. You can pair Winkalong EX with the baby Winkalong. This Winkalong non-EX does 50 damage for 3, and you flip a coin. If heads, your opponent can attack during your next turn. But if tails, you can't attack during your next turn with this Winkalong. So it's like a spinning the wheel, but it's just an okay attack on a secondary attacker that uses the same line. All 3 Lechonks have reason to be played. This one has more HP, this one draws you a card, and this one is basically a Gust. switch out. No, it's not a gust. It's a roping effect. So they need to choose another Pokemon. But all three has reason to be played, in my opinion. Cyclizar EX is basically a nerfed version of Koraidon EX and Miraidon EX. It has the same attack as both of these, but it does 10 less damage, but attacks for 3 colorless instead of 2 colors and 1 colorless. But it also has the Power Run attack, which is for 1 energy you do 10 damage and you search deck for basic and attach it to Cyclizar EX. So basically, it's weaker than these Pokemon, but it can charge itself and do damage at the same time, so it has potential to be played. You can pair it with Beach Court Energy Switch, so basically charge Cyclizar, move it to the bench with Fury Retreat with Beach Court, and then the energy that Cyclizar charged itself with, you can move them to the active. So Damage Sponge, receive the damage, receive the damage, and charge yourself with energies, and then move the energy back to the front. Energy Switch can be replaced with Armor Rouge for Fire deck. Now let's look at other support Pokemon. They're all colorless for this set, but they all can be potential good support Pokemon either for the early game or the general game. Cyclizar is kind of similar to the Kangaskhan we had I think in Fire Red Leaf Green, which for 1 energy makes you draw a card, but instead of having 2 attacks, only has 1 that does 40 guaranteed. But instead of having 2 retreat, it has 3 retreat. So that's super strong. Cyclizar has potential to just be really good in general, because I know Kangaskhan was played in some decks, so Cyclizar has the potential to be played in a lot of decks. Skakabili is a nerfed version of Dunsparce. Dunsparce made you search for 3 Pokemon and then give you the choice of switching Dunsparce. Skakabili only makes you search for 2 basic Pokemon, but it has a different attack. Instead of putting the opponents paralyzed, it has half a chance of making Skakabili immune to damage. So I think overall Skakabili is a worse version of Dunsparce, but before putting a Dunsparce card in the format I'm building, I want to test if Skakabili is enough, or if the format actually just needs at all Dunsparce. Indeedee has the same attack as the Make-A-Wish Jirachi, which is you search your deck for the Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon, and then you evolve it, and then you put 1 damage counter on Indeedee. Where like they differentiate between Jirachi and Indeedee is with the second attack. Jirachi did for 30 damage for 1 Psychic, 1 Metal, and had half a chance of putting the opposing Pokemon asleep, where Indeedee is not asleep, confused, sorry. And Indeedee just puts the Pokemon asleep and does 10 less damage. So it's kind of different to Jirachi. It's not the worst version, it's not the best version. It also doesn't hit for weakness, but its attack can use any amount of energy. Squavet can shuffle your hand, put it face down. You need to shuffle your hand face down, put it at the bottom of your deck, and make you draw 1 card with its Nestash Poke Power. I don't think it's that good, but maybe a certain card will enable Squavet in the future. It can also evolve into Greedent that does 3 for 70 if it has a Pokemon tool. Cyclizar is a basic thing that for 1 colorless makes you search for Pokemon EX. A lot of time it's worse than what other Pokemon can give you, but Cyclizar can also do 2 for 30 damage. So it's a card to keep in mind at the very least. And that's basically it for the cards I want to showcase from the base set and the first few promos. If you want to check out more of the project or participate, you can subscribe or like if you want to see more videos like that. You can follow me on my Twitter, it will be down in the description. Basically, my Twitter will be where I update. I'll show updates on the project or just update on my YouTube channels. I'll also do reveal of the cards for the next set on my Twitter. And if I would really like if you join the server as well. This is the place where we'll test the format, we'll play the format, and where I will just update y'all also for my YouTube channel or just the project, the Ex-Era Scarlet Violet Project. So yeah, thank you for watching. Check the links in the description if you want to follow more of the project. And hoping to have more players to test the project. Have a great night and sleep well.